Howdy, folks. I'm fixing to tell y'all about Texas, nicknamed the Lone Star State.
I'm particularly fond of these. I pulled them out of a place on Midgard called Texas.
Don't mess with Texas?
That's the message.
I'm Walker, and I'm Texas Ranger.
I mean, anything for Salinas.
Welcome to this week's episode of Texas Slang for Crazy. This week we're discussing the Robber Baron Cave outside of San Antonio. Sometimes the name of an area is what draws you in. In this case, the Robber Baron Cave outside of San Antonio caught my attention randomly on a Google map. The second oldest commercial cave in Texas, this area is known for strange tales and as the former site of a speakeasy during Prohibition. Much of the history is from secondhand sources, so the story of the cave wavers almost as much as the Midget Mansion or El Muerto. The cave is located alongside Old Kings Highway, which has a rich history of its own. As the former main road from San Antonio to Austin, people curious about the cave often stop to leave their mark. Graffiti has been found in the caves located back to the early 1880s, as at one point in time it was referred to by the Spanish as the Cave of the Quebrantahuesos, vulture or bone breaker. According to TCMA, Texas Cave Management Association, the oldest known newspaper article referenced the cave in 1898 in regards to a station party of troops who ended up exploring the caves while, quote, trying to discover a new route to the Philippines, end quote. Of course, we know the time frame because the folks graffitied the cave with the date and their name. The cave started to gain popularity, and as soon as 1910, even the El Paso Herald referred to it as well-traveled, and started sharing the legends as they heard them. The caves were believed to be a secret passageway that led to a massive treasure piled together by a powerful group of robbers. They were known as the vultures. If you've ever seen what a vulture can do to a human body, you'll get the drift. I don't recommend looking that one up online. In the legend, the passageway was used for these robbers to suddenly descend on travelers before capturing them and killing them in the cave, where no one would find the proof of the victim's demise, and spoils could be taken in relative peace. There were tales of man-made labyrinths, chests of gold, precious stones, diamonds, pieces of 8, and maybe the bones of some famous robbers. This sparked more interest in the caves. While the caves didn't have any pieces of 8, they did have a form of gold of their own in bat poop. Yeah, that's right, there were huge deposits of guano within the cave. The formations of bat waste gave the cave the nickname the Crystal Cave, but those deposits are now long gone. A map of the cave was found in 1921 in an article in the San Antonio Light newspaper, featuring the names of the passages and areas with such creative names as Fat Man's Misery, Sugar Bowl Hall, Old Campground, Undertaker's Parlor, Vimy Ridge, and To China. People tried to explore the caves themselves for some time, and there were pretty regular reports of people getting lost. Clearly, this is super dangerous. In the 1920s, 2 boys from a local military school were lost and weren't found until late at night. Another story tells of 2 men who ran out of candles and had to crawl on hands and knees through the darkness to reach the mouth of the cave. One of the most famous incidents happened in October 1922 when someone found a sign at the front of the cave that read, quote, 4 of us in the cave, please do not cut any string, it may mean death, end quote. The person who found the sign noticed it was wet and looked weathered. Panicked, he reported the find to the authorities. This led to a half-dozen men from the fire department, 2 officers, 2 captains, 2 deputy captains, plus volunteers gathering at the cave. After a group of rescuers had been in the cave for some time, the young men appeared at the surface, oblivious to the panicked attempt for rescue. One was reported as saying, "Oh heck, we were just having a good time." During this time, the cave was owned by local businessman George C. Sauer. He'd made a name for himself with multiple properties in San Antonio. He'd purchased the cave in 1910, but hadn't really done anything with it. With so many people interested in and getting lost in the caves, Sauer decided to turn his tourist attraction and make him some money out of his stationary liability. With help from Arthur Harp, the preparations began. They excavated a modern entrance as a large alternative to the small passageway known as Fat Man's Misery. They put a wooden staircase into the sinkhole, added an iron gate, filled the passages with V-shaped slotted floors, rocks and dirt, and decided to make it easier to walk. They also added benches and a lighting system. When the sinkhole area collapsed, Harp and Sauer began building a structure leading into the entrance and sealed the original entry point. The official opening in 1923 also brought a name change. The Cave of Vultures became known as Robber Baron Cave, thanks to a rebranding effort by Harp. He also started spreading stories about Indian massacres and monks using the caves to hide from certain death. At the time, the stories were taken seriously, marketing at its finest. The stories began to take a darker turn. Newspapers started reporting stories of gangs of outlaws led by someone named Jim Pitts. They claimed the location was where he and his men met to distribute the spoils from their robberies. Stories also cropped up about workers discovering a native tomb filled with skeletons, war relics, and weapons, and that a giant race of men had once lived near the caves. Both are unlikely, as one had to crawl into the original entrance of the cave, so I'm not sure how a giant race would have made through. Arthur Harp led tourists down the added wooden stairs, into the sinkhole, and down into the cave, all for 50 cents. From there, they'd stop in an area with a table and benches to sit. This was known as Maggie's Den, and it also worked as a place for people to cater parties. If you rented Maggie's Den for a party, you were locked into this particular area of the cave and released at an agreed-upon time, so you wouldn't do something stupid like drunkenly wander farther down into the cave. After Carrie Nation hit the Menger Bar with an axe and prohibition spread through San Antonio, the cave became the site of a speakeasy. Unfortunately, it didn't take very long for the cave to be discovered. It was raided in July 1925 when prohibition agents were told that there was still, quote, a modern Monte Carlo being operated. The problem was the agents weren't particularly prepared for cave hunting and ended up lost. With their flashlights dimming, thankfully the man stationed at the entry of the cave went to get help, and they were able to be retrieved. The cave became extremely popular for daytime visits and even self-guided tours. Many of the passages were blasted shut to keep people from getting lost. However, they didn't want to blast all the tunnels, so a few received artificial walls, plastered with cave clay to make them look natural. Tourists were none the wiser. However, after the crash of the stock market, the caves were closed in 1933 as they became too expensive to maintain. For years, there was a battle over what to do with the caves. Some folks wanted to seal it shut. It was used briefly as a commercial mushroom farm, a shooting range, and there were plans to turn it into an atomic bomb shelter. Teenagers continued to mess around in the caves, no matter who was in charge of it. Groups of spelunkers did official research on the cave, but in the 1970s, no trespassing signs went up. In the 80s, locals joined for a cleanup, and in the 90s, new gates were added and more efforts to clean up came into play. The Robber Baron Cave is currently under the care of the Texas Cave Management Association. Due to previous high traffic, the cave is only open every 18 months. If you do go to one of the open houses, wear jeans, closed-toed shoes, and plan to get dirty. TCMA will provide the helmets, lights, knee pads, and gloves. For those who have old photos of the cave, stories of their experience, or want to share their stories, the preserve manager would love to hear from you. Their email is robberbaron@tcmacaves.org. Thank you so much for listening. You can find us on Instagram for pictures of the cave at TX Slang for Crazy, on Facebook at Texas Slang for Crazy, on our website, txslangforcrazy.com, or you can email me at txslangforcrazy.com, or at gmail.com rather. I'd love to hear from you. Please rate and subscribe.